we got Olympic coverage going on here, and I'm glad to be back in the house because yesterday we were having some technical difficulties. But our good friend Carl Darden, as well as AD, definitely helped us tremendously in terms of getting things going. So glad that we've got some tremendous things to talk about, including the closing ceremonies, because the Olympics are now over. But we'll now prepare for Paris and even the Paraplegic Olympics as well, which are coming up at the end of this month. But definitely a lot of folks have been looking at how the Olympics have gone and have definitely enjoyed the coverage of the Olympics, including our coverage. But we did have a lot of folks that were worried about whether we were going to get enough gold medals. They knew we were going to win the overall, but the question was, were we going to get enough gold medals? And thanks to the play of the women's basketball and the women's volleyball, we managed to take the top in the gold category as well. So we had 39, China had 38, but that women's basketball game when they played Japan, I actually watched the majority of that game. And it was definitely, I remember one of the commentators saying, you cannot defend against size. And that is very true. We have a very tall basketball team. Japan's team was much shorter. They do have some dangerous three-point shooters, but even with their shots falling on occasion, we were just pounding it inside and were probably a lot too quick as well. So definitely it was in my mind a fairly easy win for the United States women and all of that, but it was a tremendous thing to see. And hopefully our good friend, the volleyball player, will be joining us as well, because the volleyball women won 3-0. So they won, and they helped us get the goal as well. One of the things that happened, Nick, and I was wondering your thoughts about this, is that there is a sport, and I know that I had him on one of my other shows and had a chance to interview him, and I did invite him to be here with us, but he was not able to make it this time around. But, maybe he'll come in if we decide to cover the Paraplegic Olympics, or if we decide to cover the Winter Olympics. But we had sent out invitations to Ray Leonard. But boxing is still suffering, even in the United States. This was probably one of our strongest boxing teams in a while, and even they cannot bring home a gold. I think the best we could do was a couple of definitely some silvers and bronzes and things along those lines. But I was just wondering your thoughts about why are we having such a difficult time with a sport that used to be our strong suit? Because boxing, you remember back in the day, we used to get Sugar Ray Leonard, we used to get a number of other folks, but we don't seem to be having that kind of luck now with boxing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about why are we having a difficult time in that boxing realm.
We'll do that as soon as we bring in some of our special guests. We have, of course, Ada, who's joined us, who sits on the Duke volleyball team. She has joined us. Okay, thank you, Ada. And we also have a couple more guests who have arrived. Carl Darden has arrived. Carl, welcome to the show. And then, this is what reason we have full house, 5:09. Let's bring in Fritz. Fritz, welcome to the show.
Hi there, good to see you.
Is that a Florida
yes,
shirt?
That is. Fritz is
okay.
Fritz is actually down there in Florida. Been trying to get her for a while. She is a tremendous young lady that does great work in the field of race announcing, but also in the field of definitely has done some runs of her own and is just a tremendous lady, even being a survivor in terms of disease surviving and all of that. So she is a truly wonderful person, and I'm always glad to have her as a friend and somebody that is part of our association, and was a tremendous guest when we had her on one of our shows not that long ago. And of course, Carl is representing the Navy. So I know, Nick, you do know about the Navy, and he's got a Navy sporting blog and all of that. And of course, we've got our own young lady, Addie, and everything. And Addie is over here in Durham with us, but it's part of the Duke volleyball team. So glad that everybody could join in and all of that. So I'd love to hear from everybody, but I think I want to start off with Addie. One of the things that I saw was that, I was talking about the basketball team, and that wasn't even close in my mind, but the volleyball game was a 3-0 win. So Brazil is a strong team. So how did we manage to pull that off? And what was your thoughts about this team that was coached by a former Olympian himself? Because definitely the coach of the volleyball team was a legendary volleyball player himself, but now he's coaching the women and all of that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as to how they pulled off this 3-0 win against what amounts to a powerhouse in the volleyball world in Brazil.
Yeah, this is actually the first time USA women's have won gold. Like, and if you think about that in perspective, you're like, wow, the USA has been a top contender in volleyball for so many years, but for them to actually hold gold it's amazing to see. And like, I have friends on the team with Faluke Akinenwadawo, Jordan Thompson, Jordan Larson, and it was just amazing to see all the cheer and fun and just hard work that they put into it. Yes, the thing about volleyball that's also a little bit, I feel like a little bit confusing. It can be a sweep. Yeah, US won 3-0, but it was not easy in any sense of the word. All of those matches were point to point, tick for tat. Brazil is a powerhouse when it comes to volleyball as well. So, but the US pulled it out, and I'm so proud of those girls.
No, they definitely did a great job, and they were truly amazing and all of that. So I was definitely glad to see them being involved, and definitely glad to see their thoughts and all of that. Hopefully Nick and Fitz will come back and everything, but definitely love to hear people's thoughts as to some of the things they saw. One of the things that I've seen people make observations about was how this particular Olympics, because of what we've been going through with the pandemic and because of a lot of other things, it seems like a lot of people were really resonating with the friendly aspect of the competitions. We saw those high jumpers that actually decided to share a gold. We saw some athletes that, even if they were losing, were helping each other go across the finish line and the things of that nature. So even though it is definitely a competitive thing with the Olympics, one of the things that I had read earlier today was people talking about how this particular Olympics was filled with more camaraderie and maybe even humility than some of the other past Olympics. So I'd love to hear people's thoughts about that, and if they believe that that was the case based on what you watched. So I think I'll start with you, Carl, because definitely it is something that we saw was some people that were having some more friendly competitions, and definitely were even acknowledging. Like, I think there was a case of one of our swimmers actually hugging the South African swimmer that broke a world record. And one of the things that I heard her say in a news conference or in a news interview that she did was that, it was just great being in that moment with this, with an actual world record holder. And it didn't matter that she didn't win the race. She was just glad to be in that moment with that successful person. And of course, she was going to go over there and acknowledge what she had done in that particular time that they were in the pool together. And we also saw a lot of the young skateboarders, some of them that have been skateboarding for life together, also acknowledging their friendship that they've developed in those skateboard parks around, I would argue, the world, but definitely around the areas where they were training. So Carl, what is your thoughts about this kind of like maybe a more friendly Olympics than we've had in the past?
Yeah, I think you make a good point with regard to what we saw on this Olympics. And it's probably we've not seen it on this scale in maybe a couple of the Olympics in the past. But if you go back even further, there's certainly examples of good sportsmanship being demonstrated, I guess, is the best way to say it. Are you guys still there? I think you disappeared. Can you still hear me?
Yeah,
we're all here. We're just backstage. Okay. You just get the full screen, Carl. That's
okay.
So
I actually like seeing you when I'm talking because it's a little bit easier for me to do that. But anyway,
we can do that too.
Yeah. So, but yeah, to your point, I think it's great to see, because let's face it, when you look at all the professional sports we were exposed to, whether you're talking about certainly here in the U.S., the NFL, the NBA. Major League Baseball, we hear so much just trash talking and just people wanting to step on other people's neck in the face of, in the name of competition and so forth. This is just a reminder that you can compete hard and you can compete against each other, and it can be just as intense, but it doesn't have to be, acrimonious or anything like that. And especially when you see, the example you pointed out in the swimming pool, right? I like seeing moments like that, because you're on a world stage, you're acknowledging a world record holder, and the person who the U.S. swimmer who I believe went over there was probably a previous winner herself. So I think that it's just a matter of acknowledging a good effort and a strong effort when it's put out there, and there's no weakness in that. So I'm actually glad to see it.
No, I definitely agree with you. Addie, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about this kind of like friendly nature and everything. And one of the things we've been talking about in all of our coverage is how we've seen a lot of teams that have not necessarily got recognition before winning their first ever Olympics and all of that. So that was something else that we saw this year. And there was at least 4 or 5 of those countries that got their first ever gold and all of that. So while we were glad to see the U.S. finally take over the total, even in the gold medal count, we did see some countries that had their first ever gold as well. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that as well, because definitely, among those countries that won medals were Turkmenistan, San Marino, and Burkina Faso, all of which claimed their first Olympic medals ever. And definitely we even saw some countries that people may not have expected.
Exactly. I mean, I really going back to the first point, the fact that I think the 3 notable ones for me at these Olympics were the high jumpers between Italy and Qatar, who shared that gold medal. There was a surfer who just got beat by his rival from Brazil, and he actually in the press conference translated in Portuguese to English for the reporters. And that was amazing to see. And also the 2 runners who fell but helped each other to the finish line. Those acts of kindness, especially after such a tumultuous year, is so nice to see. And it's so genuine, because people forget. And I think this was the 4 point that we were saying, especially with this Olympic Games highlighting mental health. People forget that athletes are human because we do superhuman things. I'm in the Olympics, but you get the idea. But athletes do superhuman things. So I think a lot of normal people think that they are not human at their core. And so this is just bringing it back to earth, and it's really nice to see. And concerning the countries that are winning more, I love to see it. We have countries like Puerto Rico, Morocco, Bermuda, Thailand, even winning in events that they wouldn't have won before, like in golf or in Taekwondo. And it's amazing to see. And I love this personally. Me and Nick is talking about the refugee team, because especially we have this bubble as Americans as not seeing the rest of the world and like what's happening in the rest of the world, but the Olympic puts it on the forefront, and it's so good to see these other countries participating and giving their all for their country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I finally got to see the basketball teams. I just want to bring these people up because the NBA was playing France. We had the people from the NBA versus France, and France actually has a lot of good players. I mean, Mustafa's tall. I mean, the guy is big. I mean, 7'2", nearly 280 pounds, and you could see they had 2 7-footers on the floor on France, but they also had some outside shooters. A lot of these people never played in the NBA, but they could really match up very well and probably play in the NBA, but they choose for whatever reason to play over in Europe. But the basketball team, France has, kudos to them. I mean, they lost. They got the silver medal, but really, they put on a great show. I mean, you can see the French world basketball started to catch up with the United States. And then I had to watch the volleyball teams, Ada, of course, because of you. No, it has nothing to do with you. I like volleyball. Okay. And you just happen to play volleyball. But the women's beach volleyball team, excellent. Again, they were really good. The poor Aussies just got hammered, but it helps when you're 6'5". Excuse me. And see, that's a lot of people don't know about you, Ada. You're 6'3". They just don't know that because you don't look that way on TV. You look like then when you stand up.
She's a tall lady. There's no doubt about that. Sorry, some sort of internet problems once again. I hope y'all caught most of what I was saying and all of that before it faded me out, right, and along those lines. But the other thing that I was curious about, and I'm going to actually throw this one to Carl once again, is sometimes when I'm watching these games, it's also interesting when we see international rules that are different from ours. Like I said, when I was watching even our basketball team playing, and they basically allow what amounts to what we would call offensive goaltending. Because like I said, you can pretty much just tap the ball off of the net and even kick it back on a free throw. And I'm going like, wait a minute, y'all are allowing this? In a regular NBA game, that would be playing well, it'd probably be several calls. I can see a lane violation and definitely also goaltending. So like I said, some of these rules are vastly different from the international rules versus how they are in our normal NBA style play. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about some of these different style rules, because I'm imagining that we even see that in some of the, not just basketball, which I know definitely Navy has had some great players like David Robinson and others that have been involved in that sport. But I imagine even some of the rowing rules might be different from America versus international competitions and some of the regatta things. I know that you've become a fan of that over the last few years or whatever. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about how international rules can be very different as well.
Right. So sticking with the basketball examples, I think those are excellent examples. In fact, I was talking with my son my son just finished up his senior in high school, and he played on a basketball team. And as we were kind of leading into the Olympics, I was like telling him about some of the different rules. And one of the ones I did mention was the fact that, hey, internationally you can goaltend all day long, on the offensive side, that is. And he goes, oh, that's pretty interesting. And I'm not really sure why there is a difference. I just know that sometimes it takes U.S. teams, especially if there's not a ton of Olympic experience on those teams coming in, it takes them a while to kind of adjust to the rule changes. The other thing about the international game is it's a lot more physical. They're not gonna call every little thing like players think they should, especially in the NBA, because one of the things I noticed about the playoffs is that the NBA playoffs, that is not a single player thought they ever committed a foul during the entire tournament, during the entire NBA tournament, because every time they got a whistle, they turn around and throw their hands up at the ref, But the fact is, it is a much more physical game on the international side. They don't call as much. And the other thing too is that the key itself is a lot wider on the international side, which I like. I think at one point it was a gradual increase, but now it's just a constant width all the way to the foul line. And I actually like that because it gives, as long as you keep that 3-second rule, there's a lot more space to operate in. Now, the one thing that I will say that is not called either internationally or in the NBA are lane violations. And right. It's really funny to watch that because Ethan and I, my son, were watching one of the NBA games. And it was the one with the Brooklyn Nets were playing, because I distinctly remember Kevin Durant in my shot. But the rule is in the NBA, and I don't know if it's the same internationally, but you cannot step into the lane until the ball leaves the foul shooter's hands. Okay. It's got to be clear of his fingers or her fingers before you can step into that lane. And I froze the television and took a picture of a shot where I don't know who was shooting for the Nets, but the ball was still firmly in the palm of his hand. I mean, it hadn't even gone up, where he's going to get ready to release it. And Kevin Durant is in the lane. The guy who was next to him, on the opposing team, was in the lane. And then the folks who are playing in the back, they can't move and clear the 3-point line until the ball is released either. And they showed, I think it was Drew Holiday. He was in the inside the 3-point arc as well. So they don't call that one. But to your initial point there, Mark, there are rule changes. I don't mind them because I think it does kind of show some variety in the game, and it's important. Whatever venue you're playing in, you've got to know the rules and you got to figure them out. The other thing too is, the way they inbound balls and so forth, a lot of times they don't have to give the ball to the ref before they inbound it and start play again. And sometimes that used to catch, U.S. teams off guard. Not anymore. I think most of them are kind of used to that now. But like I said, a little bit of variety doesn't hurt. And I think it's interesting to see how quickly teams can adapt so that they can go on and play their game.
Now, one of the things I know Nick has been talking about for a while now, and I don't know whether we'll be covering, hopefully we will, the Paralympics and definitely the Winter Olympics in, I believe it's Beijing, in definitely in the winter of 2022 and everything, and hopefully we'll be covering that. But I know one of the things that Nick oftentimes talks about is how the Olympics gives us a chance to see sports that the networks don't oftentimes cover, whether that's water polo, and we even get to see them when they're not doing that well. The U.S. team was actually in the 5th place game and all of that, but they were still even showing the 5th place games, and we oftentimes don't see any of these kind of like lesser bracket type games on any kind of network, and definitely we don't see coverage of those sports. So to that point, I definitely want to hear what Nick's thoughts of some of these games that he saw. But before I get to that, I'd love for you once again, Carl, to talk a little bit about how you fell into love with, say, some of those rowing sports and those kind of things that were also happening during the Olympics. I know that when I had you on my show originally, you were talking about how you had really gotten into some of those sports that we oftentimes, meaning people in the minority community, don't even think about being involved in, but you definitely became a fan of. And if you can share, and that's actually one of the things that I wanted Addie to bring up with you as well, a little bit about the naval sports blog and things that you do, because we got the boss here. So I'd like Nick to hear a little bit about some of the things that you do as well.
Right. Well, I'm a very curious person by nature, I think. And one of the things that got me interested in sports like rowing, those were sports that I used to watch when the Olympics were on in the past. You're just kind of a passing interest to say, hey, let's see if the U.S. is in here, I'm going to watch and root for them and stuff like that. But then what's happened over the last couple of years is that I've actually met world champions that went to Navy, that rowed for the Naval Academy, and then subsequently on the U.S. national team and so forth. I've actually, one guy his name is Dan Lyons. He's a class of 1981. He was on the U.S. national team all the way up through 1988, competed in the Seoul Olympics, won the world championships in the single sculls with fours, and I don't know if that they had a coxswain in that at all or not. But so I've met him. I had a chance to talk with him at length about his experience, and that kind of got me more interested. And then I have a couple of classmates who graduated with me in '84 who were on the team, and when I first started my blog last year, they were the ones who kind of told me, they say, hey, if you're looking for more content, you might want to check out the whole story behind the Naval Academy competing in the King's Cup regatta. In the Henley Royal Regatta, and they won the King's Cup in that race. In that regatta in the summer of 2019. And there wasn't a whole lot going on in collegiate sports at the time because the pandemic had shut everything down. So I did a lot of research on that race and the teams and all that, and just really, really compelling story. And the U.S. actually, like I said, won that race. It's on YouTube and everything. And then I had an opportunity to interview the coach on one of my first podcasts. And it was a really interesting conversation. And I think ever since then, it's just been one of these things where I can't get enough of it. I watched the live streams at the regional championships and so forth. The men's and the women's team won their Patriot League championship, and the men competed really strong in the NCAAs. And then the lightweight rowing team did win their national championship. So it's just more of a curiosity thing. And then the more you become connected to some of these, former athletes and then have a chance to chat with the coaches. I mean, it just kind of fuels the interest even more. So that is just, two things that probably play into my interest being, increased. And I don't know that the Navy didn't have anybody on the Olympic teams this year, but they usually have somebody that goes. And I think that what you might be seeing in a couple of years is this young lady, Alexandria Valenci Martinson. She was the one I'd mentioned with Addie yesterday, or maybe it was yesterday or Thursday. Friday, where she was on the under 23 national team. She won a gold and a silver. So in the next Summer Olympics, there's a pretty good chance you'll see her.
Sounds amazing and everything. So, Nick, it sounds like we need to start covering rowing to go along with your wanting to cover cricket as well, because I know you want the network to start carrying cricket, rowing, and of course, we're going to be carrying live Addie's volleyball games from Duke, because Duke's going to allow us to do that and everything. So we're going to see if they can make that happen as well. So it's all part of this new conspiracy. We've got to go and cover the sports world and do a lot more sports coverage and all of that. Yeah. So, like I said, Addie will be joining in all of that. Addie, did you get a chance? Because I did not. I'm not going to lie about it, but I did not get a chance to catch the closing ceremonies. If you did, what was your thoughts of the closing ceremonies? And what other than the volleyball match and the basketball match, was there anything else that you saw at the latter days of the Olympics that really resonated with you or caught your attention?
I mean, I was talking to this with Carl yesterday, that this Olympics, it's kind of, it, in lack of a better word, a bummer. Because not only for the athletes, not in the intention of the sports itself, but the part that the athletes really love about the Olympics is after they finish their event, after they're done with everything, they get to party. They get to hang out with other world-class athletes and meet all these other countries and explore the city that they're in. But a lot of them didn't get to do that this year. As soon as they're finished with their event, they had to go home. They couldn't really go to the closing event with the rest of the whole of the USA congregation, and it was nice. There was photos. The ceremony was quaint. It was cute. There was, I think, a female basketball player holding the flame, or not holding the flame, but leading the US delegation in that closing ceremony. But yeah, it was great. The athletes, they don't march behind their own flag at closing. They march together as a group, and it was amazing to see that camaraderie, but it was also just like, this is only maybe a third of the athletes that actually participated in the whole of the Olympics. But it's sad to see it close.
Yeah, I agree. It's just sad to see it close. It was interesting. I think it was the basketball match, and part of that was because Japan was playing, and of course they're the host country. But that was one of the bigger crowds that I had seen in there, and I understand there was quite a few of them with some of the volunteer corps that made up of the whole participation in the.
Oh. Well, in other news,
he disappeared.
Yeah.
Speaking about Olympic bummer, Mark goes, bing, he's off the air. Wow, that's pretty
in
bad.
other news, for the closing ceremony, the Jonas Brothers are performing tonight.
Oh, how about that?
Eastern time. So, they're going to take us right out of our summer slump of the Olympics.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, also the ratings were down tremendously on the Olympics. There were like the lowest amount of people that have seen it. Mark's beaming back in.
I'm beaming back in. Like I said, the internet is having its moments and everything.
Yeah, but it's amazing because it just, rather than just go down, it went boom, completely off. But when you're talking about the ratings, Mark, the ratings were down a lot on the Olympics. NBC really is looking to drink a lot of red ink. So is Japan. Not that there's a financial aspect to it. And Carl, if you're in the Navy, let's see, David M. Walker, who teaches at the Navy, used to be the Controller General of the United States, is on the IBM TV network every Monday. So he'll be on tomorrow. And he actually right now, he is a teacher at the Naval Academy. But just as an aside. But the thing is, the Olympics, unfortunately, and I think a lot of that to do with COVID-19.
For sure.
Not a lot of people at the Olympics, and then the coverage by NBC needs to be more like, I finally watched the France-USA basketball game. It was a good game, worth seeing 2 days later, but it's almost like you got to fit these things into your schedule, and video on demand is a lot easier to work with than to work with, hey, you got to be there at 7:30 and Friday night to go watch a certain game. So what we do at IBM TV, we actually do live, and then we do VOD. So people can catch all the shows later on. They don't have to catch it. They can view at their leisure. And then it goes to 122 countries, so that it's not just beamed into the United States. Although we are right now, everybody here is from the U.S., but a lot of our shows, that's not the case. And they're not even from the U.S. So it's a little bit different format. It would be nice to cover the Paralympics and the Winter Olympics. Mark, we'll have to look into it. I'm going to be out of the country, so I can't do the Paralympic Games, but maybe talk to Gwen and Ankit, and also one of our other problems, Ankit, because our media production hubs in New Delhi is underwater, literally, because of the monsoons, and they lost all internet connection. You learned that New Delhi has bandwidth problems. Okay, and by the way, Nigeria has the same thing. But Brother Michael solved it, so our shows from Nigeria come in crystal clear now, but it took us several months to actually solve the bandwidth problem in Nigeria, at least for his show. So his show goes worldwide from Lagos to Nigeria with not a problem. But we did win, right, Ada? We won the Olympics. We got the gold, and the USA did win. Okay, good. There we go. Good, good. I got to
Yeah,
bring this up
we came in
tomorrow.
first in all of the tallies, including gold. So, like I said,
There we go.
I think we won all the categories, if I remember
Good.
correctly: gold, bronze, and silver, or gold, silver, and bronze, and put them in the correct order, and all of that. And we even had some folks that did some amazing things. Like I think that the women have set a record of like I think it's something like 7 consecutive or something like that, but it's definitely the most ever won by like a particular group. So they definitely set a record. Of course, a lot of people are paying attention to yes, basketball. Caleb Dressel did some amazing things in terms of what he did with the swimming medals and the amount that he won. The same with the young lady that was also collecting a lot of hardware as well, and her name is slipping me right now, but definitely she collected a lot of hardware and all of that. And then even Allison Felix won a lot as well on the track field. So we definitely saw some single athletes that won a lot and continue that tradition of people that go out and don't just win one medal, but they win multiple medals because they're just that strong. So like I said, we did continue that tradition as well. So that was really amazing. And like I said, we saw some new sports, and we're going to see some other new sports when Paris rolls around. And that's when we get to see breakdancing as an Olympic sport. So we're going to see breakdancing in the Paris Olympics.
Don't forget cheerleading. Cheerleading is awesome.
Okay, I'll buy off on the cheerleading because that's pretty. That's practically gymnastics, constantly in the air. But the breakdancing,
breakdancing is gymnastics too. I mean, if you see breakdancing is some hard dancing. I've actually knew, and he actually spoke at Duke some time back. The gentleman Crazy Legs out of, believe New York City and all of that. But if you've ever, and then there's a group called Raleigh Rockers. But if you've ever watched breakdancers in action, that one I will give credit. I did hear you, Carl, yesterday when you were talking about how some of these things aren't necessarily Olympic sports. Y'all were talking about architecture, and I would agree with that. And everything, so I would agree that architecture is not necessarily something that needs to be an Olympic sport. And I know that even Nick sometimes argues about some of the sports that are true sports, but that they get way too much love in the United States and around the world, maybe not needing to be sports in the Olympics. Like I know he argues against baseball, basketball to some degree, and some of the other sports, but I do think that the competition and the way that the competition is even becoming level because more international people are getting involved in these sports. And we actually lost to Japan in baseball and all of that. So actually Japan took the gold and we took the silver. So with it being a truly international sports, I don't have as much problem with that. Or with breakdancing, I do hear you about architecture. Even I have some friends in that field, including the late Field Freelon and all of that. So I do think that architecture is a wonderful thing, and definitely there's been some amazing architectures that have happened and all of that. But then I don't know that I want it as an Olympic sport. I mean, I definitely honor them for the great work that they do. But actually, that raises an interesting question I'd love to hear from all three of y'all about, which is that after the Olympics are over, those buildings are there. And in some cases, they basically become like, how can I put it, salutes to the grandeur of the Olympics, but they're not used all that often. So like I said, I believe that in the last several Olympics, every country, and now even Tokyo, has built these great facilities and all of that. But then a lot of times these facilities sit empty. We even saw that when there was some Olympic competition here in North Carolina on like the lower level. So it wasn't like the International Olympics, but it was like one of the lower levels. I think it was either the United States kind of competition, or maybe it was even a regional type competition, but it was Olympic oriented. They went back several years back, and they even built some facilities here, meaning North Carolina, that aren't necessarily being used. So I guess I'll start with you, Nick, since you are very much involved in the legal and the political aspect, including what goes on here on the network. But what are your thoughts about after we do these great events, we have this camaraderie, everybody has their love moment and everything, but then there is the building sitting empty, and a lot of times they're sitting empty for decades.
Yeah, reality starts setting in, Mark. And let me tell you about some of the reality problems. Greece, when they held the Olympics, spent billions on new buildings. Then after the Olympics, they had no use. But here's what the Greek people had was huge amount of debt. to the international community. It caused them major financial problems that even today, Mark, they're trying to bail themselves out of. In other words, when your city wins the Olympic, you could lose tremendously. The cities that make sense is when they can reposition the venues for something else. So like Los Angeles, they have a lot of coliseums they use and swimming pools they use anyway. It can be repositioned. They don't need to build a lot of new infrastructure. Same with some major cities like Tokyo, but Atlanta and some of these other cities, going into debt to host the Olympics is just a bad deal for the cities. Unfortunately, what they're looking at is all this exposure. Athens wanted the Olympics, all this hobble, but unfortunately, it doesn't make any economic sense. So Brisbane, I know, won the Olympics. Well, they could be a big loser in the next decade. I don't know if it's good enough. In other words, does Brisbane really need the Olympics? How many billions are going to go in, and how much infrastructure is going to go to rot? Good question. Whether or not they really even want it. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I'd love to hear Eddie's thoughts as well, just about as a young person, about the cost of the Olympics and even the cost of the Olympics as an athlete. Because like I said, I know that you are hoping to be a member, unfortunately not of the United States team, but of the Nigerian team and all of that. But I do know that you're hoping to represent one of your countries of origin in that particular sport, hopefully in 4 years or 3 years in Paris or something along those lines. But it's not, in some cases, a cheap proposition even to go after it for athletes. So I just wondered some of your thoughts, and you do have friends in the lacrosse field as well. So y'all thought I wasn't listening when I was having those technical problems yesterday and everything. But I was just wondering some of your thoughts about the Olympics and even how it might impact you as you are training, hopefully, to be in the 2024 Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, in concerns with infrastructure, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is invest in the youth. Like, a lot of these Olympics are catered towards the youth. That's why we have all of these new sports like skateboarding, surfing, even breakdancing that's coming in the Paris Games. But these facilities are basically nuclear generators. They're amazing facilities that you can use to train the people in your country to hopefully perform in the next Olympics. And I really don't think people are understanding, like, or these countries are understanding that it's an investment on top of an investment, and they can really, that investment can pay itself back if you put love into it. And like Mr. Nick was saying, people like Athens, Greece is just in so much debt after throwing so much money at to make something look good at face value, but not actually thinking long term. So I do hope that some of these countries, especially in the future, think long term. In consideration of the athletes, this is something that I think a lot of people do not think about, but most Olympians are broke, especially when it comes to these events that people don't really watch, people don't really know about. But like 60% of athletes in the Olympics don't consider themselves financially stable. And unless you win a medal, you don't get paid for competing in the Olympics. So basically, let's say you're not of a country like US, who basically pays for everything and goes through, but let's say you have to pay it out of your own pocket. You have to pay for your flight, you have to pay for your equipment, you have to pay for your training, and then you lose, and so now you're in debt from all of those, probably a year or 2 years of training, probably even more than that since you've been training your whole life, just to lose, to go to this other country and lose at this top level and not get paid for it, and then find a way to scrounge up some money to get back home. And so we have elite athletes driving for DoorDash or crowdsourcing because they're trying to find revenues of money while also trying to be the best at their sport. Because once you're at that level, you have to commit. You have to spend hours and hours of your week, your day, just training and competing in your sport. And so, yeah, it's a problem.
And speaking of problems, I have one more I want to throw at you as well, Addie, and everything, which is there is a sport that I have actually been a fan of for a while. You know, it had some very bad light here in Durham as well because of some things that went on in a certain community with certain members of their athletic community. But I was actually shocked, and I know that your roommate is involved in this sport, that lacrosse is not an Olympic sport. You know, it hasn't been since like the 1904 was when the first time it was played in St. Louis, and it was a medal sport in 1904 and 1908, and played as a demonstration sport in 1928, 32, and 48. So I do know from listening to the conversation that you and Carl had that your roommate is in that lacrosse field and all of that. So have you heard any talk, or is there any possibility that we might see lacrosse as one of those added sports? Because that is a sport that I have a lot of respect for, and we've got field hockey, which is a similar sport in the Olympics, but we don't have lacrosse. So I was just wondering if you were hearing any conversations in the athletic world about that, and I'd also like to hear maybe if Carl's heard anything from the naval aspect or the military aspect, because I know lacrosse is played in that realm as well. But that's one of those sports that you're sitting there going, scratching your head that you're surprised that it's not in the Olympics.
Yeah, I'm very surprised lacrosse is not in the Olympics. Maybe, and the actual reason that is not something that I do know. I feel like lacrosse should be in the Olympics. It's a very physical sport. It's a field sport. It's a goal sport. I mean, it's amazing. Like it gives you everything that you need from a sport. Going to my roommate's games, I know that it's very intense and very fun to watch as well. I think that the International Olympic Committee voted to maybe the possibility of granting full membership to World Lacrosse to see like if it might come into the games after Paris. But as of going forward, I do not think that it's going to be an Olympic sport. As of right now, it's a demonstration sport, so it is played, but no medals are awarded. But yeah.
It's interesting you picked on lacrosse, Mark, because ESPN targeted lacrosse to be a sport that they wanted to promote heavy to add to their programming. And so in the United States, they started picking up collegiate lacrosse. The collegiate volleyball, which Ada plays, was not picked up, which drives me nuts because I know that's what I thought. To me, it's a great sport. They should have picked up women's and men's volleyball, but that's not what they do in Simsbury, Connecticut. They make choices how they did do so. ESPN picked up lacrosse in the U.S., but not volleyball. It's the powers that be that make the decision. As I said, the media in the United States, not internationally though, but in the United States, 90% of the media in the U.S. is controlled by 5 corporations, which back in the 1970s, there were 50 corporations that actually controlled 90% of the media. So we're in a very concentrated area, and at least in the U.S., unlike in India where there's 500 media companies that basically roam India. In the United States, there are 5. So it's interesting they picked up lacrosse, and they were going to make lacrosse the big event, but I don't think it even got very much traction in ESPN, and they've lost market share. So Ada, they made a mistake. They need to go do women's volleyball. I'd watch it,
Everyone would.
Everyone
I mean, we wear spandex for crying out loud. Like, come on.
Yeah.
It's a great sport.
Yeah, it's a great sport, and I think it just does. It's one of these sports that don't get enough love, and that's why I'm looking at the Olympics. I wish they would focus on that, because basketball gets love all over the world. Soccer gets love all over the world. Even cricket does, which is not a Olympic sport, bigger than basketball, but it doesn't get any love in the United States. So very interesting what they choose and what they don't choose. But I'd like to see the Olympics focus on the minor sports that don't have a lot of media play, which are things today like volleyball, gymnastics, swimming, track, things of that nature, as you would say, Mark, as opposed to baseball, football, basketball, soccer, which get a lot of love throughout the world. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting how we've seen that and everything. Hey, Carl, just out of curiosity, what is your thoughts about lacrosse as a potential Olympic sport? And are there any other Olympic sports or sports that are out there that you would like to see as Olympics, given that we don't want architecture, and I agree with you on that, but are there any sports that you would like to see out there that are true competitions, but you don't see getting the Olympic love yet? Like I said, I mentioned that lacrosse hasn't got it, but there might be others that you can think of as well that you would like to see that are truly competitive and truly interesting.
Right. So I would love to see lacrosse out there as an Olympic sport, because to Addie's point, you have soccer, you have field hockey. I guess if you go into the water, you have water polo. Those are all sports that involve a goal, putting a ball past a goalkeeper, right? lacrosse seems to be like the only one that isn't. So I would definitely like to see that. And the other side of it is I've actually played lacrosse. I didn't play at the academy, but when I was on active duty, I was a flight instructor, and I played on a Navy club team, and we used to travel all around the Southeast to play different teams. And then when I got out of the Navy, I actually moved. I don't know if I told you this before, Mark, but I actually moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, and we had a club team there that was just, we played, teams from Georgia all the way up to Maryland, and I played defenseman. So it's a great sport. It would be a really good fit for the Olympic stage. I have a feeling, though, that if it is made an Olympic sport, it would probably be one of these zero-sum games thing. In other words, they'd probably be looking at one that, okay, we tried this one. It seemed like it was going to work okay, but it didn't. So maybe they move that back down to demo status and then elevate lacrosse, something like that. I don't know. But I would like to see it both on the men's and women's side, because both of those games are very exciting to watch, and it'd be really, really cool. As far as other sports I would like to see, I'd have to give that some thought. I know that there's different variations of sports that they compete at the academy. I can't really think of anything right now. One thing that would be interesting, well, maybe not, because you have the marathon for that, but it'd be kind of cool to see some sort of distance running event, but similar to like cross country. Okay, not just on a track or not just through the city, but find some venue where they are running literally cross country and dealing with that, because that's a collegiate event that you don't really duplicate that well. So that might be something worth a look, but I just don't know that there'd be that many venues that you'd be able to do that. And touching really quickly on the use of the venues afterwards, I think Addie made a great point in that they need to have some sort of functionality afterwards. And I'm actually surprised that that's not part of the criteria for these cities that make a pitch for the Olympics. I mean, I would imagine that, if it were me, I would say, okay, if you're going to come with us at this, just for your own good, make sure you can use those venues for something later, because otherwise you're just putting your city in a hole, and in some cases it's going to take a long time to recover. One of the sadder examples of that was when the Winter Olympics were held in Sarajevo in '84, and then 6, 7, 8 years later, when that civil war hit, I mean, that city was just basically gutted, and all those venues were absolutely destroyed. So it wasn't that they were just not being used; they were rendered unusable because of bombs exploding everywhere. So that was really unfortunate. That's like the worst case scenario.
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the worst case scenarios and everything. And I saw what you put up there, Nick, about ultimate frisbee. I think that we'll get ultimate frisbee around the same time that we get MMA as an Olympic sport as well, on the opposite extreme. So ultimate frisbee and MMA on two opposite extremes. But who knows? Those both may get into there. And, there's even that whole concept, because I know that one of the other media outlets that I'm involved with is actually going to be doing a dog frisbee competition. So who knows, maybe we're going to have dog frisbee as a Olympic sport as well. So like I said, MMA in the Olympics and the dog frisbee kind of thing as well. I just don't see those coming anytime soon or things along those lines. It will be interesting as we go to Paris, because Paris has had some political upheavals over the last several years. So that's what I'm really going to be curious about, is with the Paris Olympics, how the Olympics is going to handle the protest aspect. And we've talked about it a couple of times during this Olympic coverage, but Paris just historically and even presently has definitely had some political upheavals and some political conversations going on and all of that. So I'm curious to see how they're going to navigate those waters and what they're going to allow in terms of conversations, protests, and things along those lines. Because if I don't want to put things in a negative light, but if there was a Olympic city that would almost seem ripe for the kind of most horrendous thing that we've ever had happen in an Olympics, Paris would be up there in my mind. And like I said, fortunately, we've not had any of those kind of true disasters since Munich. And of course, that was way back in the 70s. But Paris definitely has some political overtones, and definitely has all kinds of political groups that are within their community, both on the far left and the far right, I would argue, from what I understand of France. France and its politics. But I was just wondering your thoughts about the preparations of particularly the next Olympics in terms of being able to be doing this camaraderie thing, but also having a political aspect, because Paris is definitely involved in everything from climate change to civil rights kind of situations to a number of other things. So I can see this almost being like a I don't want to call it a perfect storm because it's not really a perfect storm, but if there is such a thing as a perfect storm for disaster, it could be that and everything. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about Paris and the political landscape as they try to host an Olympics.
Yeah, well, I would like to speak on this because Paris has been in the news, and every time they're in the news, they haven't been in the news for good things.
Yeah, it's been bad news. That's right.
Not even, 18 hours ago, or it's been going now for a few weeks, but like there were thousands of protesters in the streets in defiance of the COVID-19 vaccine passport. And you guys are hosting the Olympics next. Like, what? what are we gonna do? But I mean, Paris has been in the news also for its defiance against, or its combativeness against the Muslim population in their country, the banning of the burqa in Paris or in France, its political and religious leanings, its separation of religion and school in the country as well. Also, the decapitation of a teacher that was I think people led to terrorist roots. And so the country has been in a little bit of a silent upheaval. And so, like Mr. Mark said, it would be interesting to see the congregation or people coming from all parts of the world descend on Paris when even its own people don't even want to get their vaccines yet. So.
Very, very interesting. I'm going to be in Paris next week. So, Mark, I'll go talk to the people in Paris, and I'll give you a report next week on the World Edition. I'll see if I can beam in from Paris, and I'll show you all the highlights of the problems there. But yeah, and all sincerity, it's a beautiful city. I do like going to it, and because of a layover, I'm trapped there for like 3 days because of COVID-19. So I've got three nights in Paris that were unaccounted for on going to see Ben in Switzerland, okay, because of the airlines over there. But I think Paris is a beautiful city, could be a great venue. It's a big city. It's an international city, and between now and many years from now, things are going to change as we see in the world. So let's see what happens between now and 2024. Interesting what Ada you brought up about Olympians being broke. I mean, that really shouldn't be in the world. In other words, where people that reach that level in their sport shouldn't be broke. But we do have a winner-take-all economy in the world. So if you reach the top levels of certain sports, you have unlimited amounts of money. And then if you're down where everybody else, they don't have anything. So it kind of reflects our international economy. More of a conversation we should have on World Edition, Mark, and then see what our billionaire hedge fund manager Shaquille says about equitable distribution. As you know, he's not a fan. He's not a fan of that
and everything. I'd love to know what Carl's thoughts are, and I know we get ready to wind down and everything. I was going to share with Carl my one time going to, and this was years ago, it was actually here in Durham, something that was Olympic similar, and that was the Pan-African Games, because the Pan-African Games were held at Duke many decades ago, and I remember going to there because I think Dr. Leroy Walker had probably been part of the people that had recruited them coming here. But it had two highlights at that particular game. One was the fact that this was kind of in the height of some of the Black nationalism movement that was going on in the country. So I want to say it was like either in the 70s or the 80s, or maybe around during that time and everything. So it was literally hilarious because right in Durham, there was people that were representing the various countries around Africa and the African nations and everything along those lines. But then there was also somebody that had decided to make it a racial thing. So they had put in literally in the middle of Duke Stadium in Wallace Wades a contest between the white folks and the Black folks. I hate to tell y'all, but the white folks didn't do too well in that competition. It wasn't much of a competition in that particular race, but they decided that they didn't want it to be between the countries. They wanted it to be a racial thing, and they created their own scoring system. And the other thing that happened was there was somebody that, because it was, I want to say during the time that there was a certain famous song out about streaking. So they decided somebody to try to attempt to do the streak across, and they hit the steeplechase and they missed. So like I said, they hit the puddle and hit the water instead as they were trying to do that streaking across the Wallace Wade Stadium and everything. And eventually the cops caught them, and who knows what happened to him after that. But yes, that was definitely an interesting moment watching this man decide that because of the popularity of a certain song that he was going to go dashing
Call
across.
Me the Streak. That was the name of the song. Oh, Ada, you did have something on volleyball you wanted to bring up before we end our presentation?
Just congratulations to the volleyball players. I mean,
volleyball team. Okay, right. Yeah, and we're going to be able to
I
see
love
you,
that.
and we're going to be able to see you play volleyball. Hopefully, I don't know if we can film it though, because if we filmed it, there's all these legal rights. So you can't film. So we could discuss it afterwards. I don't know if we could film it on the IBM TV network. I'll see what we can do. We have to wait
We'll
till
have a conversation. Maybe we can make it happen after all and everything. Carl, do you have any? And I do agree, it's almost time to wind everything down. But do you have any final thoughts that you want to share? And by the way, I am now recruiting new shows, and Nick's giving me permission to do that. So if you want to bring the Navy blog as a live stream to IBM TV, I think that we've seen that you do great presentations. So I personally am voting that you do it on a regular basis if that's something that you're interested in. As you can see, the big boss is off to my side here and everything, and he isn't shaking his head no. So like I said, I think that we're good at all of that. So if
even Walker would love it.
A live stream, I'm sure we would love to have it as a show here on the network and not just a podcast, as you've been doing a great job, including filling in yesterday when I was having those technical problems with Ada.
Oh, that would be definitely worth considering. In fact, well, you guys are telling me this, and you haven't even. I'm not sure if you've actually heard one of my. Maybe you should listen to one of my podcasts to determine whether or not you think that's still a good idea.
I've actually listened. I don't go to these things without checking out.
I can hear through the microphone. It's a good idea.
It's a good idea.
He has one of those podcaster microphones.
Right. So, that's definitely worth considering. Is I what I've been doing recently is in the run up to the fall season starting to kick off with sports. I've been basically previewing different Naval Academy teams, and I started with football. Obviously, that's the one that brings in just about all the money, and it allows the funding for these other sports like women's cross country, which I just previewed this past podcast. Which basically, let's see, I put that one up on Friday afternoon. And the neat thing about that one was I was able to interview a classmate of mine who was on the cross country team back then. And the perspective that she brought was that, now I graduated in 1984 along with her, and that was the 5th graduating class that had women in there. Okay, because remember that they were their first class that entered was in 1976, so the class of 1980 was the first class with women in it, in any of the service academies for that matter. So 84 was the 5th class, and they didn't have a ton of women's sports at all, let alone varsity sports. But and cross country was a club sport when they got started, but then they got varsity status during our senior year, which meant more money could go towards recruiting, actually money period, because they couldn't recruit on a club level anyway. So so that's what the last episode was about. So I think, down the road I was looking at doing soccer, and I think I'm going to try and do soccer next, and then women's basketball at some point, but cover a lot of the fall sports before jumping into the winter sports. And so that's been kind of my niche for this Navy sports podcast. There's another podcast that covers Navy sports, but those guys are totally connected to all the big time coaches and athletic directors and stuff like that. So I let them swim in that pool, and I'll swim in my little pond over here. So because my goal is basically to kind of put a spotlight on, a lot of sports that you don't hear about, and kind of that's been kind of the theme of what we've been talking about today. Right. So I do talk a lot about football in the fall, but at the same time I interject during the podcast that I kind of do like a little bit of an update where you're talking about sports that just aren't on the radar, and a lot of people do appreciate that. So,
yeah, I would agree. And the thing is, we need more of that type of programming. And since we do beam into 122 countries, I would imagine there are a lot of naval alumni and current people that are in these countries that would be listening to a pod TV. It's a pod TV format. Well, podcast, except you just do it on TV, so it's not much different. You can morph it to pod, you can morph it to TV, so it's like in the middle, But we're looking to expand our programming. Right now, we run about 65 programs all over the world, and we want to do is expand that as much as possible. We definitely want to talk to you about that, or you can talk to Mark about it because he knows I'm going to be out of the country, baby. I'm gone.
Yeah.
I'll be back. Then I'll be back to watch your game, 80. I'm going to be watching the Duke volleyball
no doubt
game.
about it. Like
I already talked to my wife, the boss, and she says, "Yeah, let's go." So
first game is on the 19th.
Yeah.
So Cameron Indoor.
Yeah, Cameron Indoor Stadium, which people don't know. You can't get tickets to Cameron Indoor Stadium. No one can enter that temple because the Duke basketball team, even if you're a professor there or student, they're all sold out forever. But Ada knows how to get us in because you go watch the volleyball team.
She's the key. And you did say it's the 19th, so that's in about less than 2 weeks. And who's the first game against once again?
North Carolina A&T. And first off, the games are free. So incentive. And second of all, I'm playing.
Two incentives.
Great incentives. I need to go there as well. I think that golf tournament we're doing, because the 19th is what day is that on?
Thursday, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think there's a couple of days, or about a week or two later is when that Frisbee tournament, the WCOM, is doing with the dog Frisbees and all of that. So I don't have any obligations that day. So I might have to be there to catch that game as well and see this truly amazing young lady compete and do great as she wins and all of that, because we just know that y'all are going to run the table. See, I'm already claiming that for you. Notice I'm already doing that. I'm already claiming that y'all are going to run the table and win the division and maybe even win the NCAA volleyball championship. See, I'm trying to claim all of this for you. I'm trying to put it out there into the universe for you that y'all are going to claim all of these things. My cousin Emmett, who actually went to Duke and for his undergraduate and then served in the military. I don't think, unfortunately, he wasn't in the Navy branch, but he was in the Army and everything. So he did both the military and the Duke experience because he was ROTC. And now he's a what they call a military advisor, or like one of those civilian contractors, because they use their military experience in order to help different people in their various businesses and things along those lines. Because I know he had recently come back from the Middle East and might be going back to the Middle East very shortly to have some of those contracts with some of the business leaders over in that region. So big shout out to Emmett Spurlock and all of that. But as we wind down, Ada, if you want to give us the final rundown of the Olympic count, I'm sure we would love to hear that. And then, of course, I'd love to hear everybody's final thoughts about the Olympics and just life in general and what they're looking forward to post-Olympics now that the Olympics are over, and maybe what they're looking forward to sports-wise. So I'm going to start with you, Ada, and see what the Olympic count was and maybe some of the things that you're looking forward to post-Olympics.
Well, here's the numbers. We, the USA, came out number one with beating China by 1 gold medal. We have 39 golds, 41 silvers, and 33 bronzes, giving us a total of 113, which blows everyone out of the water when it comes to individuals. A lot of those gold medals were gotten in swimming with 11, where the United States is dominant, track and field with 7, and wrestling also with 3. But we see that we pulled it out with women's basketball and women's volleyball, also adding to that mix. China is at number 2 with 38 golds, 38 silvers, and 18 bronzes, bringing them to a total of 88 medals. They got that in sports like artistic gymnastics, weightlifting, and diving, where they had a 14-year-old get 10s across the boards twice to win that. And we have Japan, the host country, coming in at number 3 with 27 golds, 14 silvers, and 17 bronzes, and a total of 58 medals. And they excelled in a lot of traditional sports like judo. They had 9 gold medals, wrestling, and skateboarding, which is a new addition, where they also had another 14-year-old win gold. Coming in 4th and 5th are Great Britain with 22 golds and Russian Olympic Committee with 20 golds. And yeah, but U.S. comes back on top for the medal tally.
Anything that you're looking forward to post Olympics, now that the Olympics are over, other than your being involved in volleyball, which you were even doing during the Olympics, but anything else you're looking forward to? And of course, you're going to be tackling and getting all those great A's in the school as well. I have friends that are professors, so I got to shout out the academic side also.
I mean, look, my grades, we'll see. B's make degrees, you know.
Okay.
Will not fail, so that's a given. But yeah, I'm excited about volleyball player. I live, breathe, eat, sleep, drink volleyball. I'm excited to now that USA has won the gold for the first time in women's volleyball. I'm excited to see that hype around it grow, not only across the United States, but in rural towns and small towns and towns like the South, where men's volleyball does not get the love that it deserves. And yeah, I'm excited to see volleyball bringing up to the forefront of most sports. But yeah, that's mainly it. And other sports as well, I guess. Basketball's cool.
Well, before I get to Nick, the big boss, and before I get to Carla and everything, I did have one other thing that I had mentioned to y'all in the chats that y'all did not cover. I did get frustrated by one little thing about volleyball, and that is that in both of the beach volleyball matches, not the big matches with the full teams, but in both of them, they ended in the what I call like a missed net or a miscue because it goes into the net. So that's the only thing I don't like about that particular sport is I think that there got to be a rule that you've actually got to have some sort of play going back and forth because both of them just kind of ended with a kind of dry, like a disappointing ending to me. Because like I said, they were all competitive the whole time and then you lose because you serve into a net. So I just wasn't too big of a fan of that. So Ada, what do you think about that? Because I was sitting there going like, it happened in both of them. It happened in both the women's beach volleyball where the double A's won and also in the men's version as well. So I was sitting there going like, this is not cool.
Yeah, it is not cool. And it is also not cool not to be the one who hits it into the net.
Yeah, it's even less cool for them.
It's even less cool. Yeah, this is beach volleyball as well. I do not put it past them because being an outdoor sport, there's a lot of other factors that you have to go into play. The wind will get in your face, the sand, just all of that as well. So the chances of hitting the ball into the net are a little bit higher when it comes to beach volleyball. But I mean, if we're disappointed, we're not even close to the feelings of the players who actually did those deeds. But it is disappointing, but c'est la vie, that's life.
That's just life. Nick, what are the final thoughts you want to give folks as we're winding down and ending the show on this extended Olympic coverage? But it is the last day, so I let it go a little bit over and all of that. But definitely any final thoughts that you've got about our great Olympic coverage. And by the way, I thought this was an amazing idea we came up with to have this Olympic coverage. And hopefully folks are going back and hearing some of these conversations because some of them are definitely evergreen kind of content. While the competitions may not be evergreen because they happened and then they're over, some of the things that we've talked about during this week have definitely been things that will still resonate even after the Olympics are over.
Yeah, well, maybe we could do an Olympic show all year long, once a week, Mark. I mean, not every day like we've been doing, but maybe once a week we could do something like that because there's always the Summer Olympics, then the Winter Olympics. And then what Ada said was pretty important. There are a lot of people that they're not monetizing on their world status, which I think is really wrong, and media can change all that. And also the other thing, all I'm thinking is, well, maybe IBM TV should secure the international rights to the volleyball from collegiate volleyball and go like this to ESPN. But we'll have to talk about that later on in executive session. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking of. Sorry.
Sounds good. And is there anything you're looking forward to other than your trip post-Olympics? Because I know that's the big thing you've got on your mind is the fact that you're going to head out of the country.
The University of Miami, where I went to law school, is playing Alabama. I know. My son went to Duke, so we have a little bit of a problem here. Okay, but anyway, University of Miami is playing Alabama in football on September 4th, and I die when I watch the U get their rear handed to them, which may be more likely than not. But that's what I'm looking forward to next is the U, baby, the U.
You will be there and everything along those lines. You know, one of the things I was looking forward to, we didn't do that well. We made a site run, but, you know, there's a thing called the TBT tournament, which is kind of like folks that are both past athletes as well as current athletes, and they do it kind of as a tournament during the summer months and all of that. And the Golden Eagles, my Marquette team, when I was there, we were the Warriors. They won last year. They did not win this year. I think we made it to the quarterfinals and it got bumped out. So definitely that was something that I was looking forward to. Hopefully we're going to have back-to-back runs in that tournament, but that didn't happen. But hopefully we'll bounce back and claim another title next year. And of course, I'm looking forward to seeing what the team does in general, and also going to start following more closely my Milwaukee Brewers and also the Minnesota Vikings to see what they're going to be doing and following fantasy football, because I've got to figure out who the heck I'm drafting, because later on this month we're having our draft in the fantasy football league that me, my brother, and several of our friends are part of, and I still have no idea yet who my players are going to be, but I'll do some research and figure that out, because I think the draft is in 2.5 weeks or something along those lines. So those are some of the things that I'm looking forward to. What about yourself, Carl? What are some of the things that you are looking forward to as we wind down in terms of the Olympic coverage and all of that? But what are some of the things that you're looking forward to in sports in general?
Well, I think that, well, first of all, if you're looking for other potential ideas in between Olympic years, the two big competitions I always think about are the World Track and Field Championships and also the World Swimming Championships, which are usually held like every other year sort of thing. So I know the World Championships are every like 2 years, and they're kind of staggered around the Olympics. So that might be an opportunity there if you guys are looking for more things to kind of discuss in the sports arena. As far as what I'm going to be doing, most of my focus is going to be basically on my blog and on my podcast. The Navy football kicks off on Labor Day weekend, and then they have a pretty tough schedule, and they're coming off a substandard year. So I'm really looking for them to bounce back. Now they're probably not going to win the conference championship or anything like that, but they got a lot of really good players. Their defense should be really sharp this year. So I'm looking forward to covering that team and seeing how they improve over last year. And then just jumping into these other sports. I'm actually going back to Annapolis in October over Columbus Day weekend. So I'm going to be watching not only the football game, but I'll be taking pictures of 2 volleyball matches and also a soccer game too, weather permitting for the soccer game, that is. But I'm definitely going to be looking in there to take some pictures for volleyball, because sports photography is another thing I do. Certainly not a professional or anything like that, but I love doing it. I was actually getting some practice last weekend at a youth basketball tournament just so I can get reacquainted with indoor lighting and that sort of thing. So, and just getting familiar with places to position myself to catch the best shots in a volleyball match, for example. So I've been looking at some YouTube videos for that.
Definitely sounds like some great things that we're all looking forward to and everything. I did want to thank our cancer survivor and definitely somebody that has been involved in the running world as well as the world of sports in general, including making commentation on running. But it did look like she was in her car and was not able to make a full appearance. And yes, Nick, she does have connections to Florida. I actually want to say that her and her family currently live in Florida. So yes, you were correct when you noticed that Florida shirt and all of that. But yeah, I want to thank Fitz Kohler for at least beaming in and everything. And like I said, I'm sure that she'll be popping in. I'm going to try to get her to come in to some of our news coverage and even some of our other Olympic coverage as well. And I will send her a note acknowledging the fact that she popped in, but was not able to stay with us and all of that. So definitely just wanted to give her a shout out for all the amazing things that she does as well. And on that note, if it's okay with you, Nick, we're going to get our good buddy Wynn to grab that plane and get us on out of here as we fly to Tokyo one last time. Or maybe this time the flight is actually going in the opposite direction, as we're actually probably flying back to our respective homes and all of that. But definitely the symbol is us flying to Tokyo. So I guess that's still what we're going to maintain and all of that. So Wynn, get us on out of here with that plane. And of course, we'll have discussions as to what we're doing with the Paralympics and the Winter Olympics. So we're done with Olympic coverage unless we decide to come back with the Paralympics later this month into September, or the Winter Olympics, which of course will be in the winter time. So definitely there's always Olympic stuff going on. And who knows, maybe Nick came up with a great idea and we'll do like some Olympic overviews and Olympic previews every week and all of that. Maybe even some volleyball previews and things along those lines as well. So on that note, let's get this airplane on out of here. Wynn, get us on out of here.